I am Michael T. Smith. This is the Church of, and here is your message, amazingly, for the week of January 26th, 2025. We're talking about answering a question, what about our funeral? What about your funeral? What does that look like at the end of your life? We're reverse engineering down, what does it look like to the end of this year? What will that look like at the end of this month, coming up in a close of January, the end of this week, the end of this day, the end of this message, and moving our lives into an actionable space, and doing it without shame, opening ourselves up, not in a resolution idea, not in a rah-rah, but really getting down to the essence of living, and we're talking about that, and it's going to go deeper and deeper in this series. But we've started asking us, a subset of questions. What about my funeral is the big question, right? But underneath that, of course, what about your soul? And I won't go back over that. We've addressed that in the series. The second thing, what about your soul? And underneath what about your soul is what about your sin, what do I do about the sin in my life? And we've talked about that, and I'm using sin in quotes because it's just, I don't want you to hear that in an old false gospel, false Christianity, false religious way. Again, I can't go back to it. But the second thing is, what about your striving? We always talk about success and making changes, and I've come to discover in my 51 years of life so far, 51.5 years of life, I guess I just did my happy birthday yesterday, so I'm over 51 and a half. Success is a fleeting concept. You just look at all the people who rise and fall, all the people that, there's this guy, as an actor, he was on a very famous television show in the 80s, and somebody saw him working in a grocery store somewhere, and they were like, man, how could you have been a great actor on the largest show in the world, and now you're working in a grocery store? Well, lots of people work in grocery stores. It's not a problem with that. It's very few people that are ever an actor in the greatest show, arguably, of its time. So measuring success, when were you successful, or how long was a success? We always criticize one-hit wonders. Oh, that artist was there, and they're just a one-hit wonder. Just a one-hit wonder? If you had the whole world singing your song, I mean, that's amazing. But what is that success? And you mean, where are they now? Well, they're living, in a van down by the river. Somebody sent me the other day a Van Gogh down by the river, right? What is success? I can't coach you or counsel you or advise you on success, but I can advise you on striving, and it's the aim. And a member of the church was telling me this past week, they said I was kind of resistant when you talked about striving because, from the Buddhist idea, we're not supposed to strive. Also from kind of the modern church idea, or we're not supposed to strive, we're just supposed to rest. But that's not really the application that I'm talking about. That's not really even the application that the preachers that preach that are talking about. They're not talking about cessation of all, aim and intention and actualization and action. They're not talking about that. Of course, the great Richard Rohr talks about his Center for Action and Contemplation. And they always say, well, which one's more important? You have the Center for Action and Contemplation. Which is more important, in your thing? Is it the action or the contemplation? He says it's the word and. It's not action or contemplation. It's action and contemplation. And so the contemplative life is not an inactive life. So striving is not to be thought of in the sense of, I'm not going to work in my own power. I had a precious person tell me, well, I'm a believer in God, and I don't do anything that God doesn't tell me. I said, God, should I get out of bed today? God, should I go to work today? And if I don't hear go to work, if I don't hear get dressed and go to work, then I just don't go. And I said, my brother, my brother almost in Christ. That is not what it means to rest. When we talk about striving, we're talking about moving by the inspiration in our spirit towards a fuller life, or the motivations of life, that we just got to get up, get out, and get something. Well, there's things we got to do. Or sometimes being moved out of desperation, that there's nothing inside us carrying us. There's nothing outside of us pulling forward, but we are falling, grabbing the walls, digging our nails in. And we talked about that striving. And so striving can, in fact, you work hard, you hustle, you do the things that you know to do. You do, a fiduciary idea, what a prudent person would otherwise do, and that's kind of all you can do. And our lives are a series. Our lives are an endless a series of successive strivings. Well, we were going to be this, and we were a doctor, and we were a therapist, and then we stopped doing that. We were driving trucks for a while, and that didn't do. Somebody say, you're just flighty. You just go everywhere. You'll live 1,000 lifetimes. It's not flighty. It's feeling your way through, right? Straight line, wide line. Feeling your way through this thing called life, and striving it's the story at our funeral is really the story of our strivings, the story of what we aim to do, which brought us into the third item here, Ecclesiastes 3. I'll read it just a moment here, just a little bit of it. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. We don't have time to go back over that today, but it's kind of like the way I want you to see this is, we're talking about is kind of at the intersection, right, of our striving, right, and our season, because it is false, I think, that the season makes all the truth of our life. It is false, I think, that the striving tells the truth of our life, but the best any of us can hope for, right? What did the gambler, right? The best any of us hope for, was it die in between or die in your sleep or something like that? I don't know what the gambler did. You just have to know when to hold them. But that where you and I live, where you and I thrive, where you and I have our highest fruit is at the intersection of our striving and our season, because there are limitations to our striving. There are limitations to our season. And to abide in those, and to abide in the kind of the large seasons that everybody's going through in time. There's a time of war and a time of loss and a time of famine. I mean, you can be in a village where there's been a time of famine, and that famine affects everybody, but it affects everybody in different places. Why? According to their striving. You can be in a place of great striving and great plans, and then all of a sudden the whole industry you're in goes belly up. You're a whale oil magnet, and all of a sudden there's no more whale oil market magnet, right? There's no more whale oil market. So the striving and the season come together, and we're talking about what that season looked like. 4 sub-thoughts under seasons, and we're moving forward. Last week we taught thought A, when we talk about your season, it's the time of life. You're in a springtime, you're in a summertime, you're in a fall and autumn time, or you're in a winter time. Spring, everything is new. Summer, the days are long, and it's building, and it's establishing. And autumn is color in a new way. It's not all green, but it's a new spectrum of color. There's the hindsight of reconciling and reckoning, to borrow an accounting term, right? A Christian scriptures term. There's a reckoning of the spring and the summer of our lives, and there's kind of a resolve. Okay, I'm in my autumn. What will the rest of my autumn and what will my winter look like? And so. Evaluating the time of life. What time of life? You're speaking of season. What time of life are we in? And so looking at that, Connie and I just tipping our toes into the fall waters. My son coming out of high school, closing out his spring over the next couple of years. My daughter coming out of college, entering into a summer, beautiful times. My dad crossing over here in a little bit into the winter of life. And each is beautiful. And of course we live... we don't want to live dominated and shadowed. We don't want to live hobbled by the idea that winter can come at any time. It can be a quick winter, but winter can come at any time. We live in spring and we enjoy the spring. We fully enjoy the spring. We live in the summer and enjoy the summer. We live in the autumn, but we also live full well knowing that each of us could wake up tomorrow and winter has come and the sun is setting now. The days have grown short, and the sun is low, and so this is the reality of our lives, and living that with intention. But today we move to thought B, and we'll hopefully handle thought B and C here in the next few minutes. But thought B on season, about what about your season? Thought A, the time of life. But here's an interesting thing. Thought B, the timeline of humanity, and I want to talk about this timeline of humanity. Where are we in the big picture? It's an idea that I like this has just been a boon to me, a coup to me, a thought of joy to me that we're living in the 20s. You know, the new, I don't know, the new phrase, whatever the kids are saying, the big 2-5 or whatever it is. You know, we're living in the 20s. And living in the 20s right now where we're living doesn't have a lot of romance. But if you think of the 1920s, you know, and you know, for me, my grandparents were, you know, kids in the 1920s. Connie's grandparents were in the springtime of their life in the 1920s, and what must have that looked like? Someone said the 1920s were horrible. We had the flu, and we had the just come out of the war, and blah blah blah. Yeah, pretty much like the 2020s. I mean, we had you know, Mikey said one time. He was playing in his room, and I came in. He had this little little car thing, and his Toy Story Woody doll was laid there under a tissue. I was like, "What's going on? What's happening with Woody?" And Mikey was just 3 or 4. He said, "Woody has the flute. He's down with the flute." And I said, "Man, so the 1920s had the flute, and the 2020s had the flute." But we tend to romanticize. You know, we think about the jazz and all the just things of that time. And you've seen Forget Paris. You know that old children's tale. From the Allens, right? We've seen this, and we romanticize other timelines in history. And what I want you to pay attention to is, first of all, I don't want you to falsely romanticize something that didn't have its trials and struggles, but I also don't want you to miss the romance in our own time because of the trials and struggles. We look back at the 1920s and we say, "Oh man, that must have been a wild time." And then new technology and the new this and the, you know, everybody was getting, you know, out of the horses and you know, and they got all the thing, and we said, "Wow, it was just such a neat time." And you know, they were wearing spats on you know, the Rockefellers wearing spats and putting on the Ritz and all this kind of stuff. Wow, my gosh, just look at that time. Look at the way they dressed, and look at how they listen. We are in those times, and not that times weren't hard then, right? Not that times weren't difficult then. We can see the romance, and we can see the romance through the struggle. Well, here we see the struggle, but I want to make sure that we catch some of the romance in our 20s that other people are going to look back on and say, "Oh man, that was a time," and we're living in that now. You know, and I'll argue maybe not as much pizzazz, but I don't know, it's pretty cool to be alive, you know. Brother CK, everything's amazing and nobody's happy. It's pretty cool to be alive. It's okay, you know, to romanticize what was, but it's not okay, you know, to be unduly cynical about what's here now. This is trying times where this is a wild time to be alive. I mean, if you're looking around, we're renaming stuff. You know, they declare, I'm in Georgia right now. Who knows what Georgia is going to be called next week? I have no idea. I think I'm on Highway 85. I don't know what I might be on, you know, a Casino Highway. I have no idea where I'm going to wake up tomorrow. We got the Zuckerbilts, right? At our time, we got the Zuckerbilts. We got the Muskerfellers, right? I mean, we got the richest people in the world weaving in and making moves and I mean, it's wild. And we don't realize, "Oh, I don't know what's going on here. I'm not sure if I'm happy about this or this is really great. I like this guy's character. He's kind of wild." Or whatever you're doing, you're living something that other people will read about. And, you know, we just swore in a new president last week. And for some, this is great joy. For some, this is great depression. And I'm telling you, for all of us, we must have our lives anchored in transcendent things, right? In non-temporal things. And I don't know. I pray for President Trump. I love President Trump. I thank God for President Trump. You know, I got a lot of feelings on it. He's you know, sometimes, you know, I think this is the biggest idiot that's ever walked the face of the earth. I think anybody that ever voted for him said, "My God, would you please shut up for just don't say something for 24 hours. But then you say, "Man, he's a pretty shrewd dude. He outdid everything everybody expected him to do." I don't want him to fail. I want him to meet God, to contact God. It's the same thing I wanted for every other president. My God, if they could ever come into God, what a change and what a difference it would make. But I cannot lose the romance of my own life, my own timeline in humanity, for fear of things that are beyond my control. These are the things that I can control, you know? What is it? Smiles and cries, right? Is it the things I can control. And that is my dominion. And somebody say, "Well, I didn't vote for Trump," or "I voted for Trump," or "He's already changed on what I thought I voted for. I voted for this, and boy, he's backstabbing everybody on the board." It doesn't matter. You're in trouble because you put too much hope or too much fear in that basket. Because what is actionable today, What is actionable for you right now is to get out of this grieving third party. Well, I'm having sorrow third party. I'm thinking about everybody else and all the things that they're going through. And I think that we should do that. We should act compassionately towards those who are suffering. Act compassionately towards those who are being marginalized, to those who are under threat in this time. We should definitely act compassionately toward that. But we should not be incapacitated by this third party grief. Are they coming after you? Well, no, they're not really coming after me. They're coming after other people. Then step into your power, and what can you do? Well, I thought my vote would do everything. Well, your vote didn't do everything, but what is next now? You are alive today. You are alive in the crazy 20s. You are alive with the Zuckerbilts and the Muskerfellers and President Trump, and is he going to be this and is he going to be that? Who even knows? Who even knows what's going to happen? I suspect it won't be as great as those who voted for him thought it would be. I suspect it won't be as bad as those who didn't vote for him thought it would be. I suspect that's pretty much the truth with every other president in the world. Well, he could turn out to be Adolf Hitler, and if that comes, I don't think Trump's that dumb. He's a silly person sometimes, but Hitler was a supreme idiot. He was shrewd. But he was surrounded by weak people, weak Germans, weak government people. And if there's a time to act, then we'll vote accordingly, or we'll march, or we'll protest, or we'll do whatever we got to do to fix it. But my God, let's just breathe for a minute. Let's just not spiral into depression. I feel bad for LGBTQ people. I feel bad for immigrants. Then get actionable about that in your power. But don't lose your life in the middle of what you cannot control. Your life, your smile, your energy, that is your resistance. And if you're one of these people that, you say, one person asked me a couple years ago, a day after election, did your guy win, Mike? And I said, my guy? What is my guy? Who do you think my guy is? My guy won when he came out of the grave. That was my guy won when he came out of the grave 2,000 years ago. I'm not tied to this. The donkey and the elephant, that's not my people. I'm a lamb person, and I have, I see elections. I get crestfallen. I feel bad. I see elections. I go, well, that's less bad. But man, my joy, my peace, my dominion, my life is not. What is it? Nothing is owed, deserved, or expected. Your life isn't changed by the man that's elected. Well, there are going to be lives changed. Now you're talking about, but how is your life changing? Don't be so wrapped up grieving third party for you're not even the target of what's going on, that it renders you into paralysis, that you can't even live. You can't be a husband, a father, a son, a wife, a daughter. You can't even be a citizen anymore. If you want to feel empowered, act compassionately towards those that are being targeted and marginalized, but do not shut down. And if you voted for President Trump and you very quickly find out that all the hope of President Trump is very similar to the hope of President Obama, there is no presidential messiah that's going to save us. And a lot of people went long on President Obama and then came out of it and said, well, that really didn't go anywhere. It doesn't really go anywhere. A guy told me this past week, a dear precious guy, he said, listen, if voting would change stuff, they wouldn't let us do it. And I said, well, that's kind of a cynical view, but it's also true. You vote, you protest, you do your thing, and don't turn around and hate half the country that didn't vote how you voted. Oh, I can't believe that the country's all evil. You can't go through the country's all evil. We're all the same at the end of the day. We're all being activated by different impulses at the end of the day, but you're going to reach for human dignity. You're going to reach for human compassion. If your guy lost or if your lady lost, lose with humility and be the resistance that you need to be inside where you can be inside, but don't be debilitated because our girl lost. And if our guy won, learn how to win with humility. Learn how not to be the reinforcement of everybody's fears. Be the surprise that, my God, our guy won, and look at how decent and compassionate and honorable this person is. Well, ain't nobody voted for Trump, this and that. Ain't nobody voted for that pedophile Kamala Harris. This is ridiculous. It's gone too far. It's gone too far because it's taking your dominion. You're putting all of your power into someone else's hands, and it's ruining and zapping your living out of life. So if you're in and you won, then you win with humility and you win with grace, and you say, well, that president says a lot of stuff and I just wish he didn't talk like that, and my God, some of those people in some of that party, they're just they're idiots, and I just can't get with that. Well, then you be the contradiction, and you show that I voted this way over principle, but that's not who I am as a personality. Or if you say, well, the Democrats and they're all this a race and a racist and the race bait, well, then you show that you're not that person. You can can side with the policies, but don't side with the pettiness. You have the power right now. We have a new president. The voting didn't stop it if you wanted to stop it. The depression didn't stop it if you thought it would stop it. The putting your life in park didn't stop it if you wanted to stop it. Nothing has stopped it. So what are we going to do? You're going to get action. You're going to resist. You're going to resist by living. You're going to resist through art. You're going to resist through dignity. You're going to resist through focusing your energy on things that are important to you. And if you're guy one, then what are you going to do? You're going to say, wow, I want to make sure that party and politics and president and doesn't become bigger than who I am as a person, because I should go out and they say there's a lot of ugliness on television. We're misrepresented in a lot of places, but I'm going to show before anything else, I'm a good man or a good woman. But we're living this time of life, and the history books will look back and we'll know whether it was a disaster or not. We'll know whether it was a clown show or not. I have no idea. Again, I suspect it won't be nearly as great as advertised, and it probably won't be nearly as bad as we were stoked to fear, but we are ready to act in resistance. Well, you don't know, man, when they start coming for you, all this kumbaya stuff, Pastor. Well, let's not count our chickens with a hatchet. Let's just slow down for a minute and get out of fear and start working from a place of, all right, who is at threat here, and how can we speak out for their dignity? Who is at risk here, and how can we certainly not through violent means, but maybe our political means have felt like they've lost some of their power. But the next 4 years, this is how I'm going to conduct myself. This is how I'm going to show my light. This is how I'm going to exercise my spirituality. There is a place of humility. There is a place of power, regardless of what you feel about the election or what you feel about it 1 month after the election, because I don't want all of this obsession of scratching the wound when everybody in your life is saying, are you ever coming back to be part of our world anymore? Don't give your very essence of living, the power of that, over to something so far removed. Stay where you are. Stay in your impact, your very life. It's the old story of the catacombs with the bishop on his sarcophagus. It says in the catacombs below Rome, I set out to change the world and found out that I really couldn't do anything about the world. So I sat back and I changed my community, and I found out I really couldn't do very much about my community. So I sat back and I decided to change my family, and I found I couldn't do much about changing my family. So I sat out and set out to change my life, and I made all of my energy transforming not my world into my image, but myself more thoroughly, more completely into the actionable image of Christ. And now all of a sudden, that's a place to put our energy rather than in this hopelessness. So where are we in the time of life? Let's shift gear, a timeline of humanity. So in the time of life, are you in spring, winter, summer, or fall? And you might be in multiple things. On career-wise, you might be in an autumn, or you might be, age-wise, I'm in an autumn, career-wise, I'm in a spring. These are the things that I want you to evaluate. We're talking about what happens at your funeral. We got to talk about what's happening right now in our lives. Thought C on our season. Is everybody okay? Everybody surviving? Okay. Thought C on our season. Where are you in the focus of life, right? Where are you in the time of life? Spring, summer, winter, fall. Where are you in the timeline of humanity? Man, we're in the roaring 20s, and we're going to live to the max. The story's being written now, and we're going to live to the max of our Christ-likeness and dignity. But now in the focus of life, I want you to think of this. It's a powerful phrase. It's a phrase I learned from my mom, or I heard from my mom. I don't know if she came up with it, but she came up with a lot of phrases. But this is where are you? What adult decade are you in? An adult decade is about the focus of life. When you're a kid, there's not a lot of focus, man. Things are just happening to you. Birthdays, there's a milestone birthday every time you turn around. I mean, 1, 2, 3, and 4, is a Kenobi doggy dog is knocking at the door, scratching at the door. Everything's big. 5 is big. 6 is kind of, when you get to 6 is kind of in between. 7's big time. 8's big time. 9's big, not as big as 10. 11 is huge, right? 12 is massive. 13 is massive. 14's kind of mid, right? It's not 15 up, 16 up, 17's kind of, but 18. Whoa, man, 19, well, that's kind of 20. Oh, the big 2-0, the big 2-0. Well, as you get up into the adult decades, It's like, how old am I? But I'm gonna tell you, the how old am I? I don't know. I'm 50. Am I 53 or 54? 53. No, I'm 53. Yeah. Let me tell you, as you cross over a little later, they start to matter big time again, right? So there may not be much difference between age 3 and 4. 3 is big, 4, but 83 to 84, all right. I mean, they start counting in a different way. Connie and I live our lives seasonally. We think of, in the focus of our life, where is our primary energy in this season of life. She and I have already lived through our youth season, our establishing season, right? And you'll live many lifetimes, and vocationally and geographically, and you'll live many lifetimes. But we've lived through our youth season. We've lived through our establishing, okay, we're going to set up camp in this life. And in many ways, our life has been transient. I think I counted up in my lifetime, I've lived 30 different homes. Connie and I, since we've been married, we've this city, that city, back to this place, back to that. So we're just on a journey. We're those type of people. A major key to your life is, again, building your foundation in something transcendent, that this world is too volatile. The snow globe gets shaken up too violently. And man, when all of your life is anchored in this, no wonder you crash out. But when your life is anchored in something that holds, that transcends, that'll be here before the storm and after the storm, you're able to weather those seasons differently. So we've done the youth, we've done the establishment. Connie and I have done the meet, date, and marry. So we've lived that season. Got to meet someone, got to date someone, got to marry someone. Connie and I did all that in like 3 hours. As a matter of fact, today, here we are, January 26th today. We are 24 years since our first date. 24 years our first date. We walked in, we kind of did that awkward Christian hug. Should we touch or not? 4 hours later, they shut Carrabba's down. We were standing in the parking lot. I said, I'll marry you right now. That was 24 years ago today. I don't recommend that for anybody. Don't try that at home. It's gone okay for Connie. I give it a C+. No, it's really great. So we've gone out of the meet, date, and marry, and I think meet, date, and marry, how to meet, date, and marry a woman may be on Understanding TV. So if you say, what is that? How to meet, date, and marry a woman? It goes for how to meet, date, and marry a dude. It's a bloke, right? It's the same thing. But there's a series on that. It's just one part. It's about 75 minutes. UnderstandingTV.com. You can write it later. It's down there. Maybe there's a link or something. But coming out of the youth and establishing ourselves, we went to the meet, date, and marry season of our life, and then we rolled into the building and birthing season of our life. Now that we're moving together, we fell in love, right? What does C.S. Lewis say? The posture of lovers is face to face, but the posture of partners is side by side. And Connie and I had this meet, dating, and marry where we're face to face, and the whole world is you. The whole world is you. Is there even another world besides us? Well, that's great, the meet, date, and marry phase, but now you got to turn side by side, and now we're going to face the world together as partners. And so we've gone into the building season and the birthing. And not just the birthing of children, although we have gone through that season, but the birthing of our shared inner life, our shared inner dream, the striving, right? So we've gone through those seasons. And then we had children. And I'm going to pause here and talk about this. And again, that's not my season. I'm not talking to you about your season. I'm hoping that as I discuss the seasons I've gone through, you can locate yourself, ping yourself within those seasons. And so Connie and I, after we went through the building and birthing, and then it was time to have children, we had 4 at our first talking. Connie said she wanted to have 4 children, and I had never really thought about it. I was like, oh yeah, kids, I guess I just thought about it. I never thought I would ever be married. And she told me on our first date, well, I know I'm going to have a daughter named Olivia. And she said that on the first date. And I said, oh, Olivia, that's cool. And again, this is like an hour into the date. I didn't know I was going to marry her. I was still 2 hours away from knowing I was going to marry her. So it's like, oh, well, I hope that goes good for you. And then I was like, I hope that goes good for us. So that was a thing. And then we had a son, and I didn't, want to name my son after me. I thought I don't want him growing up hating his name, as I named after my dad, the boy named Sue or whatever it is, mangy guy. I just didn't want him to say, because every time you call my name, he's like, say my name, and I hate that name. I didn't want that, and I went back and forth, and then I held him, and I was like, my God, he's here. And so I don't know if I addled him with a blessing or a burden, but there was a time a couple years ago, he said he's Michael T. Smith II. He said, Dad, I'm going to try to have the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. He said, I want to see how many Michael T. Smiths we can get, how many generations. So that made me feel good. Then he was like, can I have $20? So, I think I was playing on that one. But when you have children, right, And this is going to help you when you have children. Say, I don't have children. Just hear me out. Just listen to me. Don't disqualify yourself from what I'm saying. Say, okay, Lord, I'm listening to this. Let it wash over me. Our lives turned, right? Where the focus was one another, or the focus in our youth and establishing, we were all ourselves, right? And then we went to the meet, date, and marry. All we could see was each other. Then we turned to the building and birthing stage. All we could see was how to get what's out of our heart. But when our children came along, our focus shifted to what? Our focus shifted entirely, right, to the thriving of our offspring. And that's a powerful season, that your season shifts entirely to the thriving of our offspring. No, not my wife. We didn't put everything in our kids. We still love each other. I understand. But you know why it's good for you to love each other? Because that tends to the thriving of your offspring. Well, we still make time for us. Our life isn't all about the kids. Do you know why? Because you need your own scuba mask for your own relational and individual oxygen. I take me time. I'm not one of those people that make it all about my kids. Why? Because a healthier you is essential to the thriving of your offspring. This is the order, right? This is the order of the universe. And there is, when you have children, a decrease of us, right? Less of us and more of them. And this is the proper order of the season. I'll never forget, I was mentoring I did some mentoring with some NFL individuals and professional sports organizations, and that was a different season of my life. And I'll never forget this sweet young man. He had a baby, and it was so exciting. And then I talked to him. I checked in with him, and the baby was like 6 months. And he's like, yeah, I feel like I've lost my wife totally. It's like I'm depressed. It's like I'm an afterthought. And I said, brother, you're not an afterthought. This is the order of the universe. That now both of you have turned together toward the thriving of your offspring. And, we don't want to get too far into that. But childhood, happy childhoods, protected and preserved childhoods is the main goal of life. It's the main goal of the world. It's certainly, if you ask Connie and I, what is your vision of life? Well, it's not to have a big church and a big steeple and doors and the people. And we do a lot of things. I'm doing my one-man show coming up, and Connie tutors, and I do counseling, and all these different things that we do. And I write and work with screenplays, and I do all these things, part inspiration, part motivation, part desperation, we just put it together in life. But our primary, someone said, what do you exist for? We exist for the protection and preservation of happy childhoods. This is an essential thing. And this is essential for us, not just as humans, right? If you really want to know, I used to say at CJAX, I used to say, we have children's ministry. People think that we have children's ministry so that the adults can come, that the adults have to get ministered to, so we have children's ministry to preoccupy the children. I said, no, that's not it at all. We actually want the children ministered to, so they asked me to come out and teach you to preoccupy, to keep the adults' attention occupied. So happy childhoods is the essence of Connie and I. If you look at us and what we're trying to bring into this world, it's protecting and preserving happy childhoods. That is a communal responsibility. That is a I don't have kids. You're not listening to what I'm saying. We've already established in our previous series, say I'm new to this. Well, we've already established when you line up the 7.5 billion people in the world, the richest, most happiest heartbeat on the planet is a child. Some child just in the springtime of life, just locked in the basement with an orange crush and a Super Mario Kart is, the happiest person on planet Earth. And at 7.5 billion, the last place is a child who's being harmed and abused. Childhood. If you read the Christian scriptures, if you read the record of the gospel, which at once gives a picture of who God is and then takes away with the other hand. But if you can read between the weaponized religion, you're going to see childhood is given a priority and a preeminence, and protection and preservation of children. This is not a parent's thing. It is a human goal. It is what makes us human. We have the deepest part of ourselves. A lion and a bear meet on the road. They're going to go at it. A bear comes across a little lion cub. It's like, I got to do something here to help this lion cub out. This is the idea. And of course, sometimes they eat lion cubs, but we don't compare ourselves to animals. None of us have an injury-free childhood. All of us have come out of childhood with injury, right? By simple virtue of the fact that none of the people responsible for curating our childhood world were themselves exempt from injury. That's a big, complex sentence. What it means is, you got bumped and bruised in childhood because the people controlling the world, they themselves were bumped and bruised in childhood. None of us come out of childhood into the adult decades of our life without injury. All of us come out with injury because the people curating our world were themselves injured. This is how the world works, right? I mean, rinse and repeat. So what? We come up injured in a world that was full of injury. We are products of that. We are once products of that world of injury, and we are, progenitors, right? We are heirs of that world and progenitors of that next world of injury. Rinse and repeat. This is what in the Christian idea of original sin, right? Original sin doesn't. It's come to mean Adam did something bad, and God's going to send everybody to hell because of what Adam did. Which that whole thought comes from the dark powers, comes from Satan. Satan, or whatever name you want to call them, the dark powers, the dark thoughts, the idea that, well, Adam messed up, and so everybody's got to go to hell because of that. It's original sin. You can't do anything about it. Satan told that lie to the church, and of course we repeated it. I repeated it. I repeated it with passion, and it's idiotic. But original sin, it means original wounding. When we talk about innocence in the Catholic tradition, the Catholic tradition, the word innocence simply means unwounded. And the reason that no one in the world is born with innocence is no one in the world is born without wounding. No one enters into a world unwounded because they enter into a world that's entirely wounded, and that is what we share. We don't share a culpability that we're all going to be, go to the bad place because one guy messed it up. We are heirs of a brokenness, and we pass that brokenness on. That is what's happening, and so none of us come out of childhood into the adult decades without injury. And I don't say this to suggest that all childhood injury is equal. When I say, well, all of us had injury in childhood, I don't mean that everybody's childhood injuries are the same. They are different by kind and degree. There are different kinds of injury in childhood. You know well what I'm talking about. And even within those kinds, there are different degrees of it. So there's kind A, there's a molestation injury, there's a physical abuse injury, there's emotional abuse injury, there's a neglect and poverty injury, there's a shattered family injury, there's abandonment injury, there's different kinds of childhood injury, right? And then there are degrees. There's level 1, level 10, level 10, those mix together. All of us come out with different injuries by a different degree, and surely our own capacity for considerate observation looks and says, well, yeah, everybody had a rough childhood, but my God, it wasn't like that. I mean, you don't need a textbook for this. You just can know this by observation. Talk to your spouse and find out what that's like, and you'll find out, wow, I thought I had it rough, and found out, or my spouse thought they had it rough, and then they found out there's different types of injury and there's different degrees of injury. I'm not saying all childhood injury is the same. I'm just saying that all of us have childhood injury. Nor am I declaring that any childhood injury is entirely debilitating. I'm not saying, well, we're all messed up in childhood, or some people are more messed up in different types and degrees, and man, if you had a really bad childhood, you're entirely debilitated, you just can't live a life. That's not true. Surely, what we can see about human resilience, the capacity of the human soul to bounce back and to thrive despite the chaos is amazing. Look at people who come out of war zones. Look at people who come out of horrific abuse. Look at people who come out of genocides. And people who come out of all sorts of horror, trafficking, and all this. And you look at them and you wouldn't even know their story. You wouldn't even believe it. That happened to you because the soul's ability to bounce back. But here's the truth: it never bounces entirely back. Right? It's all the scratch in our oak tree. Right? Is always a part of who we are. As we grow into adult decades, those child injuries, that scratch in our bark, that scratch in our soul and psyche, as we grow, it becomes, I mean, you can carve a heart into, M, hearts, C. I can carve that into an oak tree, and I can carve that into an oak tree, and boy, what that takes up on the 10-year-old oak tree, it takes up, X percent, but the more that oak tree grows, it's a smaller and smaller percentage. No child comes into an adult decade entirely injury-free. No injuries are all the same by type or degree, and no injury is entirely debilitating. Somehow people, through much more horrific trauma than you and I could ever imagine, are able to stand upright and walk through life. And sometimes they walk with a limp. Sometimes that limp is imperceptible. Sometimes they're very good at hiding the limp. But once you get inside, you'll see that all of us have dysfunction. All of us are working out these traumas. Each of us emerges from childhood into the adult decades at once more injured than we realize and yet far less incapacitated than our small self would have us believe. I'm going to say that again. Each of us emerges from childhood at once more injured than we realize. I did fine. It's cool. I mean, what? My dad worked, my mom worked, this and that. And then you get it and you go, okay, wow, I guess I guess I did pick up some bumps and bruises along. I don't want to hear about that. Make me a victim. Nobody's saying to make you a victim, but everybody knows that lives with you knows you were damaged in shipping. That when they married you, one of our favorite comedians is a guy named John Mulaney, and he's talking about the death of grandparents and which grandparent, he doesn't want his grandparents to die, but if you had to pick one, there's an obvious answer, and he says, well, your dad's mom, right? I mean, if one had to go, your dad's mom could go. So he says, oh my gosh, you can't get rid of grandma. He says, well, he says, well, she didn't do a good job at being a mom, and everybody laughs, and he says, I'll tell you what, you don't believe me? He says, ask your mom if your dad's mom did a good job raising him, which is just the ultimate thing. Ask your mom if your dad's mom did a good job. So that tells you a lot. So all of us come out into our adult decades, out of childhood, more injured than we may realize. But we also come out far less incapacitated than our small self would have us to believe. Somebody said, well, my childhood was perfect. It was picnics at the lake and noodle salad, and I'm totally fine. I think when you get out there in the world, you're going to find that there are some bumps and bruises that you went through along the way, because that's the reality of life. But then the other people, I can't do anything. You know what? I've been through childhood. I think when you get out there and find that your ability of your soul to bounce back, to marshal strength, to face the world, that there's some toughness to you, and that toughness to you is probably a little abrasive to the outside, but people don't know what you've gone through, and so you got to figure out how to take that toughness, which is a brilliant unintended byproduct of what you've gone through, and use that to stand and to plow through life, but also to soften that, to realize that your survival instinct may have made you indifferent to other people's suffering. So you're at once more injured than you know, and at once far less incapacitated than we might tend to feel. The key, of course, is faith. I've been saying this over and over again. The key, of course, is faith. And I mean faith here, I have it in quotes, not merely in believing, I believe, I'm a believer in God. I want more than that. I mean faith in the Hebrew sense, right? In the Hebrew scriptures, faith in the Pauline sense, that it's living. When you talk about faith, you don't mean, are you a person of faith? Well, I believe God and I confess the word. That's not what it means. Are you a person of faith? Well, I do pray or whatever. That's not what it means. It means that faith is our entire life. That is that we are more anchored in the large reality than the small one. We are more anchored in that which transcends than the small one. So the small reality is the legacy of injury, and it's a legacy of injury more than we might like to admit, but also not as incapacitating and debilitating as maybe we put on. But the only way you're going to transcend that is to say, but my life is bigger than the chaotic world that shaped my childhood injury. This is reality, right? And what we're trying to say is that this reality that we live in is the small one. This reality is the small reality. The larger reality is where we choose to anchor ourselves. And what we're saying is that this entire world and the entire universe and ourselves as an extension of that universe, that we are ultimately spirit. We are not only spirit, but we are ultimately spirit. We are not tangentially spirit. We are ultimately spirit. Somebody said, what are you talking about? The day you realize that your childhood injury, God forbid it got to your body, obviously it got to your soul, but it has not reached the very essence of who you are, which is ultimately spirit. So because I'm spirit, I take my scratched oak tree soul, I take my traumatized soul and body, that my brain keeps record of all of that, and my spirit rises up and I say, I am coming out of childhood, and I am aware that I am injured. I am aware that I am injured in ways that I'm not aware of, but I am not as incapacitated as my story would say, because my largest reality is the spirit of who I am, and I go forth and I thrive in my adult decades. I might hobble, I might wobble, I might walk with a limp. I turn it into an extravagant step that says, man, he's got style. Why? Because I I will never fully escape my childhood injury, that it's no longer the parts per million are not even detectable, it is there. But I will not be crushed by it, because my observation says people can bounce back from greater than I have, and I will flourish in my adult decades. And so when Connie and I talk about the happy childhoods, when we talk about protecting and preserving childhood, we're talking about a parental component. There's a parental component that Connie and I's job, knowing that my own children will not escape childhood without injury, but how can I preserve? How can I minimize? How can I protect that formative season? How can I protect their springtime for better chances at summer, autumn, and winter thriving? This is what happened. Connie and I, we love you, I love you so much, my mon chéri. We were meeting, dating, and married, but then we were starting to go out and birth and build our world. But then when children came along, oh wow, our job is now to try to protect and preserve that. Somebody said, I was too busy about survival. I couldn't deal with that. Listen, a lot of us don't get the playbook ahead of time. And church certainly doesn't talk about it, right? It's kumbaya and shout the victory, and you don't know how much my sin cost. And nobody's really talking about what we should be thinking about the thriving of our offspring. But you're here today. So the protection of childhoods is not only a parental thing, but it's a communal responsibility, right? Connie and I play a parental role protecting our own children's childhood, but we play a communal role that every child we come across, right? That I see children, I say, how are you doing? I speak to children. I find children that are bullied. I find children that are ostracized. I find the kids in the school that everybody says, that's a dropout and a burnout and a druggie and a dopehead and a dweeby and they all think he's a righteous dude. All the people that thought Ferris was a righteous dude, I go find those people and I just try to say that they're seen, and neighborhood kids, and this is just what you do. Why? Because it's a communal responsibility. You find the kid that's bullied. You find the kid that's always in trouble. You find the kid that's always getting the class to lose a privilege. Come on, John, be quiet. Just be quiet. And you got to go find that kid and say, look, I know your parents are crashing out on you. Your class is crashing out on you. The teachers are crashing out on you. But I see you, dude. I like those shoes, man. That's cool. Hey, so you're into Mario. Man, I like Mario. I mean, you got to find a way in the middle of that. Why? So the person goes, they don't grow up and say, everybody always hated me my whole life. There was somebody that reached into my... there was somebody that reached into that world. You have the idea in locos parentis, right? This idea that even in the absence of parents, there are parental responsibilities that come along. I mean, that's when you send your children off to school, right? It's kind of like, adults are watching, right? Parents are watching. Like, that's kind of the unspoken contract, right? That if your kids are out there and I see them playing in the street and a stranger's coming up and you want to see some puppies, I say, hey, what was it? Well, you're not my kids. Well, but protecting childhoods, right, is our responsibility. I was in I think it was a Panera Bread one time, and I was sitting there, and there was a little kid sitting. It might have been a Five Guys. I don't know. It just depends on how much money. If I had like $12, it was a Panera Bread back in the 90s. If I had $360, it was a Five Guys. Last week. But there was a little kid sitting there, and just this little kid sitting in a chair, and I looked around, and there's no parent there, and no parent there. And, folks were coming in, and, and I remember thinking to myself, well, who in the world? Somebody better come find this child, make sure this child, where's the parent of this child? What's going on? They're just sitting out here on this bench. What's going on out here? Blah, blah, blah. And I thought, well, time's good. And then it hit me. That child's okay. Why? As long as I'm there, that child's okay. Right? I don't know what's going to go on. But it's not like, oh, man, something terrible's happened to that child. Man, I guess the parent should have been there. I don't know where the parent was, but I was there. That's that communal responsibility of securing happy childhoods. And we ought not look our individual parental role or our communal role. Parents are primary, but guess what? Grands are also there, right? Aunts and uncles are also there. I don't have children. Well, aunts and uncles, extended family, the community are always in a supportive role. And sometimes grands are called upon to assume a primary role. Aunts and uncles are called upon to assume a primary role. Well, this is not my kid. This is not my trauma. This is not my problem. But guess what? There is a role communally where we sometimes have to take on the primary role for preserving and protecting childhood. So that has been the focus of Connie and I's life. And when the kids were little, we focused on them and all the little kids. And as they grew, we focused on them. And I'm still, they're 17 and 20, and I meet their friends and I check in on them and how you doing and what's going on and what's in your world. And what's so wild about this is, my mom had a lot of strength. My mom had a lot of weaknesses, right? talk about trauma. There's just a lot going on there. But one of the things that she had was this ability to just see a kid and talk to a kid. And when you're a kid yourself, you can't see your parents' gifting, you can't see your parents' brilliance. But I met some friends a couple of years ago. They were in town, and I went down to somebody's house and we had dinner. And they asked about my mom, and I said, well, she passed away. And this guy, he's in his 50s. He said, you know what? Your mother was the only person that was ever nice to me. He said, I was being thrown out of school. I was victimized. I was being physically and emotionally abused at home. And he said, when I would come over to your house, your mom would always say, well, tell me, man, sit down. Let's talk about what's going on. He said, I mentioned poetry to her. She said, you write poetry? Man, read me some. And he said, I pulled out my thing. I read it. And he said, she was the one that told me, you ought to write a book with that. That's beautiful. You should seriously. She said, I'll help you write a book. If you get it together, I'll help you. And this guy's in his 50s with tears in his eyes. He says, she was the only person that was nice to me. It brings tears to my eyes now because I realized I had not heard that story till 2022. But I didn't realize that that's how I go through life. Why? Because happy childhoods. And someone goes, happy childhoods, man, that's person's 14. People don't cease to be children. They don't cease to be amazing. This is what I learned from my dad. Children don't cease to be fascinating once they hit 12. They're fascinating at 40. My dad said, I never had a 40-year-old son before. And watching you go through life and watching you make missteps with your children, or when you succeed or when you win, or watching you bounce back from a hardship and me being there to encourage you. You don't cease to be a parent. You don't cease to have the role for the thriving of your offspring just because your kid hit 12 or 13 years old. I'm getting all out of breath. Like I feel like I'm Bernie Mac. This is crazy. I'm not going to say the F word, right? Not while the service is going. Though none of us, I hope you're getting what I'm saying. I'm just rambling. I got to be here gone in 5 minutes, but I want you to hear what I'm saying. None of us who have been tasked with providing happy childhoods are themselves full possessors of what we're supposed to pass on. I can't pass on an injury-free childhood because I didn't have one. All the little boy stuff in my childhood I didn't have. Wrestling with dad and being flung in the pool. I was afraid of men. By the time my dad came along and adopted me, I was 8 years old. It was like, okay, well, let's go play golf. Let's throw a football around. I didn't know how to do any of that stuff. I wasn't raised with any of that stuff, and as a result, I couldn't pour out of an empty cup. And you want to talk to my kids about art? They got art. You want to talk about music? You want to talk about politics? You want to talk about the humanities? You want to talk about philosophy? You want to talk about religion? Man, they got it in spades. You want to talk about technical excellence in writing? Man, they write. They're published. I mean, they can do all that kind of stuff. Well, go out there and throw that football across this thing. Man, we can't throw no football across the thing. I mean, they can do a little bit of that kind of stuff. They can throw a ball. They can catch a ball. They can jump rope. They can hunt. They can fish. They can string a trout line. Country folks can survive. But I poured out what I had. None of us are entirely capable of passing on what we don't have, but we are empowered to bring a redemptive arc to each generational story. I can't say, well, I didn't have this in my cup, but because of the Spirit, because of God, because we can acknowledge where our cup is lacking, but with the help of love, right? With the largeness of wisdom, we can offer maybe what we did not have. We can start with an eye and an ear to hear and to see around us. Wow, there's inspiration for generational thriving all around us. You just watch how somebody talks to their kid and you go, boy, nobody ever talked to me like that. That's a better way to handle it. Why? Because when I was growing up and I wasn't doing right in a parking lot, my parents squeezed my hand till my knuckles thing, and they said, you better walk next to me in this parking lot. And you see somebody else and say, hey, how about we do a piggyback ride to the parking lot? So I never thought about piggyback rides. There's inspiration for better generational thriving all around us. This is the beauty of the grand, right? What is it about being a grand that you don't understand? There's just stuff that you learn by time and by wisdom. And you now what? Go into that next level of generational thriving. I hope you're hearing us. Everyone is our superior in some discipline, right, Brother Maxwell? Every person is my superior in some discipline. If you go through life as a student, you can learn everywhere. I didn't have this in my life. There's inspiration all around if you just pause to say, God, help me with the largeness of who you are, with the largeness of your love and your wisdom. Help me give to the generations around me as a direct parent, as a grandparent, as an aunt and an uncle, to pour out of an empty cup that I don't have. God, you have to fill my cup by love, by the winds of inspiration showing me a higher way. I don't even have this in me to give, but somehow I got some spillover from someone else and was able to impart it. This is the essence of what it means when I talk about generational thriving. I thought we were talking about seasons. I'm just sharing where I am in my life, where I have been for the last, 20 years. And it's where I am. Please keep in mind as we close today, this idea of seeing and getting inspiration and finding more, hoisting our sail to catch some winds of help me do better in my generational impartation. It doesn't end, right, once a child becomes a teen. Nor does the wonder of childhood or the responsibility of protecting that childhood cease when our children are grown. Like I told you, what is it about the word grand that you don't understand? I was talking to one of our members this past week. Somebody said the reason grandparents and grandchildren get along so well, they have a common enemy, right? I mean, that's a thing, right? Connie and I have walked these milestones, and we're walking these milestones. I just got to stop, because if I say the next word, it's going to not be, I'll just end up rushing. I feel like I've talked too fast already. I'm sorry. I made a resolution last week. I was going to slow down, and I'll get back on it next week. I hope there was something that you got out of it. Let's stop there for today. As I mentioned at the top of the service, you're hearing these messages. It's the close of a month. You say, "Wow, this series has been so good. I found your church at the beginning of the year, and I've just been tuning in. I've been telling everybody about it. Wonderful, awesome, glorious." You're saying that you got value. Support us. I'm asking you. I'm not asking people that don't get value to support us. Why would I ask anybody that says, I don't get anything out of it? Well, then it's not for you. But if you are saying, my God, then I thank you for your support. I'm not even asking you to pray about it and consider it. I'm just saying it's a right thing to do. I cannot imagine a scenario in which Connie and I would tune in and listen to a teaching or to a podcast or to something and say, man, this is changing our lives, it's changing our marriage, it's changing. And then we would say, well, we're not supporting that. It's not an honorable way to handle the transaction. It's not who we want to be. We place a premium on wisdom. We place a premium on inspiration. And Connie and I just thank you for your support. You're supporting the messengers. What you're getting is a message. And you're supporting the messengers who bring that message. And that is a good and a right thing. And we thank you for it. But beyond that, who you are as a church, who we are as a church, it's not like, well, what are the poor people giving me? Well, we're giving to them, right? What are the hurting people of the world giving to me? Well, our Christianity, the fact that we want to be an ongoing embodiment, we want to be God in human form, right? Love living in human form. That's who we are. That's what we do as the church, right? You getting something out of the message, man, this message is changing my life, and I'm being a blessing to the messenger. I'm being an extravagant, my God, it's impacting me huge, and I'm being a huge blessing. And huge blessing to Connie and I is different for everybody. You got huge resources, huge blessing means one thing. You're in a very difficult season, huge blessing means something else. You know what it means, and you and God sort that out. But this over here, this other side, is about all of us going out, and instead of channeling our religion to a weaponized institution, an us-them idea that makes God conditional and transactional, we put all of our energy on a declarational idea. God is good. God is love. I am an embodiment of true religion of that love. I'm easing suffering and embodying love everywhere I go, right across the kitchen table, to across the street, to across town, to across the world. That is the essence of what it means to be a Christian, to live charitably. And I thank you as a part of this church for doing so. Okay, that's it. Peace, health, protection, preservation, soundness, abundance, aboveness, prosperity, favor, the Zoe life and goodness of God. I speak it on you, on yours, on your generations up and down, and on every role you play in the community. You may not have children of your own, but you are part of the community called by God, commissioned and empowered by God to bring redemptive stories to children. The happiest people on earth, the most misfortune and unfortunate suffering people on earth. If there's going to be dignity for them, it is up to us, and we act and we live in that, and you are empowered to act and live in that this day and this week. What about your funeral? What about your funeral? Top part of that is going to be who your legacy is as helping children. And you can do that big and small. And Connie and I, as your pastors, bless and empower you to do that in big and small ways. Not just throughout your life, but starting today. Peace on you and yours. In Jesus' name. Connie and I love you. Make it a great week.